Hey everyone. Hi. Welcome to Seedy Sunday. My name's Carly. I ran this Seedy Sunday session as a free Zoom meeting, and I've recorded it to share with everyone on YouTube now. I teach at Denmark TAFE in Western Australia. So I've got a packed out information session for you on seed saving here, mainly on vegetable seeds. So grab your cup of tea or coffee if you're feeling especially seedy. And yeah, I'm going to run through it with you. I'll just share my screen. Okay. Right. Welcome. So a bit of an outline of what I'm going to talk about today. So first of all, I want to start off with a little bit about why we save seeds. So I think that's incredibly important that we understand why we're doing it. It helps with motivation and can inspire people who maybe don't save their seeds yet or are thinking about it to take the step and save their own seeds. I'm going to talk about what you need to save your seeds. Just talk about a bit about equipment that you need, and just to show that you don't need anything fancy or flash to save your own seeds. I'll talk about the methods that we save seeds by. So today I'm going to cover dry processing, wet processing, and fermentation methods of extracting seeds from plants. They're the main methods that I use. I'm not going to talk about them too much there. Like, I'll go over them briefly and what vegetables we use for each of the methods. But then I'll go into more detail on beans, tomatoes, lettuce, and pumpkins. And they will, there'll be more detail in there about each of the processing methods. I'm going to talk about storage of your seeds and how to store them in the correct way so that they're viable for years to come. And then I've got a nice little list of resources at the end to share with you. All right, so in my live session, I asked everyone why we should save seeds. So if you're watching this YouTube video, you can comment on it and say what your reasons are for saving seeds. I'd really like to hear from you. I shared my major two reasons for saving seeds. So my major two reasons is, number one, for health. So not only are you getting vegetables that are clean and green and you haven't sprayed any nasty chemicals on them, but your seed and the seed that you're saving is also not being treated with any fungicides or chemicals. But you're also growing your own vegetables as well. So, and that means that you can walk straight out your back door and eat them fresh. The quicker you can eat your food, the more nutrients you're getting out of it. So if you can eat your lettuce as soon as you pick it, you're getting maximum amount of nutrients out of that lettuce. If you're eating food that's been stored or left for days, it loses an incredible amount of its nutritional value. So that's one reason why I save vegetables, seeds. The other reason is this erosion of diversity. So I'm incredibly concerned about our loss of genetic diversity in our vegetable varieties and our food crops. So in this diagram here, you can see it goes from 1903 commercial seed houses. This is the varieties that commercial seed houses offered in 1903 down to 1983. And these are the varieties that were found in the National Seed Storage Library in 1983. So there is an incredible loss, like the width of the bands here show the loss of diversity in our varieties. We started off in 1903 with 497 varieties of lettuce, down to 36 varieties in 1983. And I don't know what the number is today it would be interesting if someone updated this diagram. This diagram was originally published in the National Geographic in 2011. And I think it just really visually shows that incredible loss of diversity of all of our varieties of vegetables. And the loss of diversity is concerning because from an ecological point of view, diversity equals stability, and it equals a stronger ability. The more diverse ecosystem or range of species that you have, the more ability you have to adapt to change. So yeah, it's incredibly concerning. So onto what we need to save our seeds. And I wanted to show this just to show that you don't need anything flash or fancy to start saving your seeds from home. You can do it with an old sieve from the op shop, a couple of paper bags, a bowl, and some envelopes to put the seed into. It's as easy as that. I use the big paper bags to dry out like lettuce seed and brassica seeds in. Yeah, you don't need anything flash. You can get different sized sieves from the op shop. A couple of different sized sieves are good to have, so they've got the different size grates in them, and you can use them for varying sizes of seeds and that. This one here shows an envelope that I've just got some lettuce seed drying out in. The envelope's probably not big enough to dry the seed out in, but it worked. I probably should have used a bigger bag, like one of these big bags, or buckets as well are really good for drying your seed out in and catching it in. Some people like jars to store the seed in. Some people like their seed to be airtight. You can get airtight foil bags so they don't let any moisture in. I think for beginners or people starting out, or home seed savers even, it's better for me or us to use paper bags because they allow the seed to still breathe. So if you perhaps haven't left your seed for long enough to dry out and you put it in an airtight jar or foil bag, the moisture in your seeds can come out and cause the seeds to go moldy in the jar or bag. So that's why I use paper bags, because it's a bit more forgiving if you haven't left your seed for long enough to dry, and which can happen because it always takes way longer than you think for your seeds to dry out. This was just included because it's a bit more of a sophisticated seed saving item that you might like to get if you're doing big quantities of seeds. We use this one at Denmark TAFE, and it's really, really good. But like I said, you don't need it. You don't need anything flash. But I must say, if I was going to get one thing, I would get a sieve like this. So it's a sieve that it's got different sized grates here, and it's got different shaped grates as well. So it's really good for different types of seeds, different shaped seeds. It's got different sized grates, so you start off with the big one, get out all the big chaffy stuff out of your seeds first, and work down to a smaller sized grate. And they interchange into this sieve here. So I don't know where you can buy them in Australia. I know, or locally down here. I know in Australia you can get them at Kim Seeds online, I think, which is KIM Seeds. But if anyone knows, they can pop into the comments on the YouTube video if you want to share that information with us. If you know we can buy good seed saving items or equipment. So seriously, that's all you need. A couple of bags, envelopes, sieves. I'm not going to get too bogged down in that. Onto methods. So there's three main methods that we can take vegetable seeds out with. One is dry processing, which is just as it sounds. You're processing the seed when it's dried out completely on the plant. That's used for lettuce, brassicas, onions, beets, carrots, celery, coriander, chicory, beans, peppers. Number 2 process is wet processing. So that's just as it sounds, you're just washing the seeds with water. That's used for melons, zucchinis, pumpkins, capsicums. I mainly use it for zucchinis and pumpkins. I would probably actually use dry processing for my capsicums, and I don't really grow melons, but I imagine they would be good to do wet processing with. And fermentation is mainly, well, I only have really used it for tomatoes. It's good for tamarillos as well, and tomatillos, and good for cucumbers. Because it's good for any seed that has a gel sac on it. And basically you're just fermenting the gel sac off the seed to clean it. And I'm going to talk about all of these in more detail in the slides to come. So I won't spend too much time on this one. So in the live Zoom session, I asked everyone to comment on what their top tips are for seed saving. So if you're watching the YouTube version, you can pop it into the comments down there. And I've collated all of these tips in a document if you want to access it off me, or my contact details are on the first slide of this presentation. I'll happily send it through to anyone who contacts me. So take a moment, and this was just as a little breather in the live presentation, but I'm going to keep on going here. So beans are the first one up that I'm going to go into detail on. So I've picked beans, tomatoes and lettuce because they're all self-pollinating vegetables and they're easier to save seed from. So with their self-pollinating vegetable, it means that it's using its own pollen to pollinate itself. And often with beans and tomatoes, the flowers pollinate themselves before they even open, because the anthers, which are the part that have the pollen on them, are touching the stigma inside the flower, and that causes pollinate. But we can do another session on that another day. It's getting a bit complicated. Beans, self-pollinating, so easy to save from. They don't cross. They don't usually cross. In saying that they're self-pollinating, it doesn't mean that they won't cross. They can still cross, and they will if you plant them really close together. It's only a really big deal if you lose, if you really want to save a particular variety and you want it to be true to variety. So when bean seeds are ready, they sort of go this tan colour here. They'll go tanny colour, or they'll go a dark browny colour. So the pod will crack when you open it, so it will shatter, or you break it open, it'll crack open. It's really, really dry. And if possible, you want to let them dry on the plant or in the ground. But if it's going to rain, or mainly if you've got rain forecast, I would probably get them out of the ground as quickly as you can, because once they get the rain on them, it can cause fungal diseases and mold. And so we've got, so this is how I do my beans down here. This is just my little bean seed saving station that I set up. I just pop them out of the pods, but you can do it any way you want. You can put them into a plastic bag or a pillowcase or something and just hit it or stamp on it to get all the seeds out. You can crunch them up in your hands. Just basically, it's the threshing process, the part where you separate the seeds from the plants. I just like sitting there and popping them out, and it works for me. And so this is the other colour that your beans might go if they're dried and ready to pick. These ones are broad beans that we've just picked off the plant, and they're dry enough to process now. So with beans, you want to be particularly vigilant with your quality control. So anything that's a bit discoloured or has spots on it, or holes or the seed coat is cracked, you want to put those aside and chuck them away. Basically, you don't want to save seeds. And this picture here is an example of seeds that I wouldn't save. So they're deformed, like these little guys here are a bit wrinkled and shriveled. They either have spots on them, like these ones are a bit spotty, they're discoloured, so they're brown. This rusty colour here is not good. Yeah, this one, I don't know if you can see that, but the one at the back there has a cracked seed coating. Anything that's damaged, yeah, got little insect holes in it, discoloration marked, you want to chuck that away instead of saving it. One of the best things I learned with bean seeds is this fingernail test. So when your seed is dry enough to save, you shouldn't be able to make a mark in it with your fingernail. So if you get your little seed and you try to dig your fingernail into it really hard, you shouldn't be able to make a mark in it. If you can still dent that seed, it means that it's not yet dry enough to save. So with bean seeds, it's really important to leave them for as long as you can, to dry them out completely and totally before you put them in a container or a bag to save them. I know people that also will hit them with the hammer to test whether they're ready to save. So if the bean shatters, then that means it's dry enough to save. And I just wanted to a quick word about varieties as well. So you can buy varieties of bean that are specifically for a dried bean variety. This is one that I grew that was a specific dried bean variety. It's a Cali bush bean, which is CALI bean, and it's grown for its dried beans, but you can also eat the green bean as well when it's young, and you can do that with a lot of dried beans. So there's borlotti beans and haricot beans that are grown for the dry seeds. So yeah, it'll say when you buy your bean seeds originally, it'll say whether it's a green bean variety or a dried bean variety. Okay, so that's beans. On to tomatoes. Tomatoes, so with the tomatoes, we're using the fermentation method. And I used to be scared of this method because it just seems a bit more complicated than everything else. But it's actually really, really easy. And once you've done it once, it's so easy. You're basically just fermenting your seeds. So you chop your tomato in half and you're scraping out all the seeds into a jar. And then you fill the jar with water and you want to let it sit for a couple of days, like 3 or 4 days. I've left them for up to a week just by accident before, and they're still fine. But don't leave them for too long because they will start to germinate if you leave them for too long. And this one here, I just included this picture because it's a little tomato that I grew, a cherry tomato. So as an example, tomatoes are self-pollinating vegetables as well. So it's unlikely that they will cross, but if they're planted really close together, they will still cross. But it's, for beginner seed savers, they're a pretty safe one that you're going to get good results out of. But this little one here was an example where some cherry tomatoes I had did cross, and I got this little red tomato with purple top, and it's got a red belly. It was really acidic, strong tomatoey flavour. And it's, I didn't get what I thought I was going to get from my seed, but it's really exciting because now I have the opportunity to save seeds from this little tomato because it's edible and it's delicious. And I'm going to try saving seed from it for the next couple of years and breed my own tomato variety, which is really exciting. So with the fermentation, we're soaking the seeds for a few days, 3 or 4 days. You end up with something that looks like these jars here. So the pulp will separate from the seeds and it floats up to the top there, and the seeds will sink to the bottom. So there's a couple of reasons that you want to ferment that gel sac off your seed. So number one is to get rid of the fleshy, wet stuff around the seed, which can, inhibit it makes the seed harder to store because it's still got fleshy, moist matter on the seeds, and it's harder to dry them out and separate them and stuff like that. But also that the fermentation or the breakdown of that gel sac on the seeds is an important trigger for germination. So it increases the germination rate of your seeds doing this as well. So yeah, it's pretty important that you do it, and it helps to extend the life of your seed as well in terms of storage. So once you've got the jars that look like this, so I would give them a shake every day as well, just to help the pulp separate from the seeds. And sometimes, some people will say to wait until the white mold forms on top. Mine haven't really ever gotten the white mold on top, but you can see visually how they're supposed to look, and you can look at the seeds in the bottom and see whether they look clean enough to save yet. So when they're ready to process, you want to water winnow them. And I've just learned about this, and it works really well for cleaning your tomato seeds or your whatever you're doing this with. You can do it with cucumbers as well. And like I said at the start, tamarillos or tomatillos are good. So we're water winnowing basically means you're cleaning the seed with water, you're winnowing with water. So what you would do is you would pour off the top layer here. So pour off all this pulpy, fleshy stuff and leave the tomato seeds in the bottom. Then you would fill the jar with water again, let the seeds settle to the bottom, pour off the pulpy, fleshy stuff off the top, leaving the seeds in the bottom again, then fill it again with water, pour off the top, and just keep on doing that over and over again. Once you've done it multiple times, your seed will get really clean. The fleshy, pulpy stuff will just keep on getting stirred up and floating to the top and poured off. And yeah, you'll end up with really nice, clean tomato seeds. When I've done that, I actually still put them in a little sieve to wash them as well. So yeah, they're there in the little sieve, and you can just get them in there and swirl them around and give them a real good clean. Then I like to put them on a plate. I don't really like to put my seeds on paper towel or tissue paper or anything because they get stuck really easily. And some people, that doesn't bother them, but it's just personal preference really. I don't like storing them with bits of paper stuck to them, and I feel like it could cause fungal diseases or something. So I like to put them on a plate. So yeah, spread them out on a plate, and then in a day or two, when they're sort of dry, they'll be all stuck together and stuck to the plate as well. So I will scrape them off and break them apart and give them a stir up. And then for every couple of days after that, I'll just give them another stir up, so that they're drying evenly on both sides. And then in a couple of weeks, so I would wait about 3-4 weeks before I stored my tomato seeds. And by then they should look something like this when they're dry enough to store. So they'll get this nice furry coating on them. Okay, lettuce. Lettuce, another really easy vegetable to save from. If you're starting out, it's a good one to start with. Another self-pollinating vegetable, but lettuce still requires insects. So unlike beans and tomatoes, which pollinate themselves as they open, lettuce doesn't do that. It still needs an insect to pollinate it. So yeah, but self-pollinating vegetable, you only need one lettuce plant to save seed from. Unlikely that it will cross, but it still can, like with the tomato example. This is lettuce seed that we let go to seed at TAFE that we're getting ready to save from. With lettuce seed, it stages its flowering. So it will flower, it will have, formed seed, it will have half formed seed, and it will have opening flowers on the same plant because it does it in stages. So it's hard to get it to dry out completely. We sort of wait until it's 50-60% seed has formed on the plant, and you can I'll show you how to tell that in a minute. And then you chop it off and chuck it into bags or into buckets. Work really well as as well, and you leave it for a couple of weeks to dry off completely, and by then it will be becoming brittle and the seed will be starting to open and fall out of the lettuce plant. So yeah, this is the process for lettuce. It's the same as beans, like it's dry processed vegetable seed, but it requires a bit more in the cleaning department and winnowing department if you want it to get really nice and shiny and clean. So yeah, you're harvesting, wait until you harvest your seed, like in the picture beforehand, till it looks, 50 60% dry. Then you chuck it in a bag or bucket to dry out further for a couple of weeks. And then you do the threshing. So that's separating the seed from the plant. So you can do that by putting it into bags and, jumping on the bags by hitting the lettuce seed on the bucket. I've seen grating on the sieve works really good. So just getting in there and scrubbing the seeds, it makes all the little seeds pop out. Then you want to sieve your seeds. So start off with a really coarse sieve with large holes to get out all the really big organic matter, because you'll have a bucket of stuff that's just got lettuce leaves and flowers and stalks and bits in it. So you can sieve it, get out all the big stuff, get a finer sieve, sieve it again, just keep on working through it until lettuce seed is very fine, so it will go through quite a fine sieve. You can pick out stuff with your hands as well. And then you might be left with something that looks a bit like this in the picture. So it's still got a lot of chaffy stuff in it, that fluffy stuff that lettuce seed has in it. Still got flowers and stalks and bits in it. So when it looks kind of like that, you can you can store it like that if it's completely dry, so you don't want any green bits in there. If it's completely dry but it's still got a lot of chaff, it still stores. Lettuce seed's very forgiving, it will store fine as long as it's completely dry. I often save my seed like this and it still, it grows perfectly. It even helps thin the seed out a bit. So it's like when you mix carrot seeds with sand to sow them to, separate the seeds a bit and give a bit more better spacing in your sowing. It's the same thing with this, except you're just using the chaff that you've saved your lettuce seed in. But if you want to get it really, really clean, you can. I've got my lettuce seed quite clean before by winnowing it. So same idea as water winnowing, except you're using air instead. So a couple of ways you can do it. You can blow on it until you almost faint, like me, or you can get, I like to use 2 big bowls, and you can just pour the lettuce seed from one bowl to the other from a height, and do it outdoors, preferably, a light breeze is good to do it. And what that does is the chaff and the fluffy stuff will just float off in the breeze. I've seen little handheld fans as well, like really gentle little fans that you can get in there and just blow the fluff off all your seeds. They work quite well. But basically it's just experimenting with the air pressure. Basically, the idea is that you want enough blow to blow the chaff off your seeds, but not to blow your seeds away. So after I've done my winnowing, I will still leave my seed out in a bowl on a table for a couple of weeks, and I'll stir it up, give it a little stir every couple of days, and I find that just gives the opportunity for it to, if there is any bits that still need drying out, or if there's insects in it as well, it's a really good way to give the insects an opportunity to all clear off, and then you can store it. And here we go. This is how you tell when your lettuce seed is ready. So this little one here, you can see the seed has formed inside the flower, and you can see the fluffy bit on top. So when you see all those fluffy bits forming on your lettuce, you know that the seed's probably almost ready. And you should be able to see the seed inside the flower like that. When you pick the flower head and you rub it between your fingers, all the little seeds will pop out, like this one down here, little almond-shaped, quite plump seeds when they're viable. And you can see little parachutes attached to each seed. So this one here is dark seed. That's a red lettuce. If you've got a green lettuce, the seed's probably going to be white or a pale colour. Okay, on to pumpkins. So I've included pumpkins because they're a cross-pollinating vegetable, and I just wanted to include one cross-pollinating vegetable today just to show you how it adds a little bit more complexity to your seed saving. So this picture here is some pumpkins that I grew, and they're all different species. So I grew all different species, so I knew I could save seed from them because different species will not cross. So point here is that it's really important to learn your taxonomy, so your plant taxonomy and scientific names for plants, and also your vegetable families when you're saving seeds for vegetables are really important to know, because if you know the families, you know characteristics about that family that can help you know how to save the seed, how to save good quality seed, and how to stop them crossing and things like that. So pumpkins are in Cucurbitaceae family, and that includes pumpkins, squash, cucumbers, and melons. These ones are outcrosses, so they're cross-pollinating vegetables. So that means that they require the pollen from another plant to produce their seeds. So, and the reason that's a pretty important thing to know is because if you look at this table here, these top 3 species here are all species of pumpkin or squash. So and within each of those species, there's a whole heap of varieties that are still the same species. So that means that these varieties will cross. For example, look at this top one, Cucurbita maxima. So that's the species of pumpkin that you're growing. So within that species, there's all these varieties on the right here. We've got Jarrahdale, Queensland Blue, Golden Nugget, Banana, Buttercup, Hubbard, Turban, Potimarron. All of these varieties are the same species, and that means that they will cross-pollinate. So if you're growing Jarrahdale and a Golden Nugget, they will cross, and the following year when you plant out your seed, you might get something that looks like a Jarrahdale, you might get something that looks like a Golden Nugget, or you might get a plant that has characteristics of both. And that might be sad if you're trying to preserve a variety and you don't get what you thought you were going to get. But it's not all doom and gloom. I think it's still really so easy to save seeds from pumpkins, and even if you get crosses, they're usually still absolutely delicious. So and yeah, you could breed your own variety of pumpkin if you got something really interesting happening. So similarly with this one, Cucurbita machata, that's got all the butternut varieties in it. So if you're growing wrinkled butternuts and Waltham butternuts, they'll cross, and you'll get, usually I've done it before, you'll get a mix of, so you'll get some that look like Waltham butternuts and you'll get some that look like wrinkled butternuts, which it's not bad. They all taste delicious. It's just whether you want to be growing a uniform variety that you've got to start getting picky with your seed saving. An interesting thing that happened at TAFE was we grew spaghetti squash and zucchinis, and this year we saved seed from the spaghetti squash. And this year when we planted it out, we got spaghetti squash that were green and looked kind of like longer and kind of like zucchini. But when we chopped them open, they were still like spaghetti squash on the inside. They were still delicious to eat. But obviously they had crossed with the zucchinis, and but it wasn't a big issue, not for a home gardener, because they were still delicious and edible. So pumpkins are the wet processing method. I also included them because they're my example of wet processing, which is basically wash them and dry them. So yeah, I just chop the pumpkin in half, scrape out the seeds into a bowl, and I mush them up and wash them and pick out as much of the fleshy stuff as I can. Then I'll put them in a sieve, and you can put pumpkin seeds in a fairly coarse sieve so that all the fleshy stuff can wash off. Give them a good rinse and stir up, and then I'll put them back in the bowl, wash them again, and put them in the sieve again, sieve them again. And I'll do that about 3 times until those seeds are so shiny clean, like this. And then, yeah, like I said, I like to put them on a plate. The same with the tomato seeds. I will wait a day or 2 for them to dry. Then they'll be stuck together and stuck to the plate. So I'll scrape them up and separate them all. And it's important to do that because you don't want moisture trapped when they sit on top of each other or they're glued together. Moisture can get stuck in there and trapped and cause fungal problems in your seed. So yeah, 3 to 4 weeks or longer if you're not sure. Always better to leave all your seeds longer if you don't think that they're completely dry. These ones were Cucurbita maxima, I think, and they're easy to tell when they're dry enough because they get a cellophane, like a plasticky looking coating on the seed. It looks like cellophane, and that's when you sort of know that they're dry enough to save with that particular species. Okay, just a word on storage before I finish up. So there's only 3 things you need to remember with storing your vegetable seeds, and that's to keep them cool, dark, and dry. If you remember those 3 things, you can't really go wrong. And also remember that they're extremely forgiving. I had lettuce seed from 2014 that had been left in a hot room on a table. It had been in the sun for years, just in an envelope. At 2014, and I grew it out in 2019, and it still grew beautifully. So, whoops. So you want to keep them at a constant temperature. So a fridge is actually good to keep them in because the ideal temperature to keep your vegetable seed is sort of like 4 degrees, I think. But if you don't have a fridge, you can just keep them in a room or a dark cupboard with a constant temperature. So I keep mine in my laundry, so that's away from the main heating of the house, and it stays sort of cool in there and relatively stable throughout the year. You want to make sure that you're storing them in a dry place, so in a dry cupboard, not a damp room. And you also want to that also refers to making sure that your seed is completely dry when you store it. So here's a couple of examples. Here is our fridge. So all the shelves have been taken out. The temperature's just been turned down to the lowest setting, so you're not freezing your seeds. It's just a pretty cool constant temperature. I haven't tested the temperature in there, but it's it's probably around 4-5 degrees. And these are just kept in plastic tubs, in paper bags in the tubs, and they're just organised according to their plant families, which I've found to be the best way to store my seeds is by family. Just because the characteristics, and you start to learn what families are planted out when, and yeah, that works really well. Or this is my seed collection at home, just to show that you don't need anything flash or fancy to save your seeds or store your seeds, sorry. I just have a box, and I've just got cardboard separators in there, organised into families, and they're just in paper bags or envelopes in my laundry cupboard where they stay cool, dark and dry. And that's it, everyone. If you've got suggestions for future Seedy Sundays, I'd really love to hear what you want to learn about. Because I'm pretty passionate about this subject, and I think I would like to do more Seedy Sundays and spread the word about seed saving. I want to share these resources with you before I go. So this top one here, seedsavers.org, has heaps of great free articles and resources. You can spend days trawling through their website. It's really great. I've included this one, seedfreaks.com.au, which is one of my favourite Australian seed companies in Tasmania. They have many beautiful heirloom varieties, but also they have a free download, a guide to seed saving, which has been adapted specifically for Australia. And it's really awesome, just really good for people starting out with seed saving, simple and straightforward, and doesn't scare people off with the science, which is what I tend to do. Seed to Seed, Seed Saving and Growing Techniques for Vegetable Gardeners by Susan Ashworth is a book which is a bit more heavy on the science end of things, on scientific names and plant taxonomy and isolation methods for your vegetables. So if you're getting a bit more experienced and in-depth with your seed saving, you might like to take a look at that one. Similarly, this one, Breed Your Own Vegetable Varieties by Carol Deppy, goes really in depth on the genetics of your seed saving and how to breed your own varieties. Really exciting, but yeah, probably for the more experienced seed savers. Then this one, Seed Savers Handbook by Mikkel and Jude Frantum, is a bit more of a basic book, simpler, instructions and directions. So yeah, probably one I'd recommend for beginners. Sorry, my dog's running around outside there. He's really distracting me. If you haven't watched this documentary here, Seed the Untold Story, it can be streamed from this link here. That's an amazing documentary. I love it. So if you want to get inspired and motivated to save your seeds and learn about the sort of condition of the seed industry, that's one to watch. All right, and that's it. Thanks for watching, everyone. Yeah, if you've got any suggestions, feedback, ideas you want to share with me, please contact me. If you're interested in any courses at Denmark TAFE, contact me. If you just want to talk about veggies or seeds, contact me. Yeah, sending you some bean love. Yeah, I hope to see you again on another Seedy Sunday. Thanks, bye.